This video gives a quick introduction to spreadsheets using Microsoft Excel. So what we have here is an Excel file that's open. When we open a new file in Excel, it automatically creates a workbook. A workbook is a series of different tabs, and we can do different things in each tab. Right now, it has one sheet in it. We can add a new sheet by clicking on the little plus down below. We're going to work in sheet number 1. Some of the things you need to know about spreadsheets are this. They look kind of like a grid. We have columns that have letters as their heading. So this is column A, this is column B, column C, etc. And then we have rows that are noted by numbers. So this is row 3, row 4, etc. Each little square in this table is called a cell. And each cell is identified by combining the letter for its column and the number for its row. So this cell here, for example, that's highlighted, is cell B3. If I highlight down here, this would be cell E12. Within each cell, we can enter all different kinds of information. So one thing we might enter in a cell is text as a heading, for example. We're going to use spreadsheets to make the data table that you had used to track the data from your experiment. And the first column that you had recorded data for was the date. So in this cell, A1, I'm going to put a heading, and this is date. So in there then, we might enter dates. Let's say you took your first reading on March 18th of 2014. I would enter 3/18/14. Let's say that you took your next reading on the 19th. I would enter the date there, etc. The next thing that you might have in your data table is you might have something that says your meter reading. So again, here I'm going to enter text as a column heading. Within this column, I can enter the actual numbers that I saw on my electric meter. So let's say, for example, that the first time I read it on the 18th, it was 54,376 kilowatt hours. And then perhaps the next time that I read it, it was 54,390 kilowatt hours. And you can see I could continue on. So far, all we've done is we've taken the information that you had recorded by hand and we've typed it into the spreadsheet. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to start asking the spreadsheet to do some calculations for us. So one of the next columns you had in your data table said kilowatt hours used on any given day. And we said that the way we found the number of kilowatt hours used was we took today's reading and subtracted yesterday's reading from it. What we're going to enter into this cell then is we're going to enter, instead of typing something in directly, we're going to enter in a mathematical formula. So the formula that we're going to use here, we start off by entering the equal sign. That's how we tell Excel, hey, there's a formula coming. And notice that it has equal sign and then the cursor is blinking there. So what I want the value of this cell to have is I want to start by taking today's reading. So I click on the box that has today's reading. And notice that what shows up here is the cell location for the box that has today's reading, B3. And from that I want to subtract. So I type a minus sign in there. I want to subtract yesterday's reading, B2. So I have this formula that says the number that's going to go here is the value in cell B3 minus the value in cell B2. And now I simply hit the return or enter key, and it does that subtraction for me automatically. Now you might think, Mrs. Dever, isn't it just easier to do that math on a calculator and type the 14 in? Well, if you were only going to be entering one number there, that's true. But let's say that you had a bunch of different dates here. So suppose my dates went up by 1 every row in my spreadsheet. So I could say I'd like the value in this next cell down to be the value it was the cell before, plus 1 more. Look at that, it automatically added a day to the date. What I'd like you to notice about this formula is this A3. That A3 isn't going to always refer to cell A3. What it actually is referring to right now is the cell that is 1 above where the formula is. This is something called a dynamic reference. And where this is useful If I were to take this cell that has that formula in it, and notice that in the lower right-hand corner it has this little square. If I grab and drag that little square down, it's going to take the formula, which was add 1 to the cell above it, and it's going to replicate that formula for all the cells that I drug down. So look, my formula kept changing, so now I have a whole long sequence of dates. Now the meter readings I am going to need to enter in here because those are things that I read directly off of my meter, and they're not things that Excel has any way of knowing or calculating. So let me just take a minute to add some more data in here. So let's say those are my meter readings. If I go back here to the formula for number of kilowatt hours used, the formula that I entered here, it looked like it was B3 minus B2, but really what this formula represents is today's meter reading, that is the entry that is on the line directly to the left of where the formula is, minus yesterday's reading, the one that's right above it. So if I take this formula here and I grab the corner and I drag it down, what I'll see is that each day's formula is that day's reading minus the previous day's reading. Each day's formula is that day's reading minus the previous day's reading. It takes the formula and it replicates it all the way down. So now I have this table that shows me all of the kilowatt hours used. Cool. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to enter some information in here showing what your meter readings were. To save you a little bit of time, I've created a spreadsheet for you that you can download right from Moodle that already has these formulas entered in it. The last thing that I want to show you is we can have Excel do some statistical calculations. So for example, we have all of these different readings for how much electricity was used each day. Suppose that I wanted to know what the average number of kilowatt hours used in a day was. There's a formula that I can enter for that. And I'd like that value to show up here. So I'm going to put a label, average kilowatt hours per day. And I would like, for the number that is the average kilowatt hours per day, I'd like that to show up in this box here, in cell C13. So in C13, I'm going to put a formula. To start a formula, I enter equals, and then what I'd like it to do is to find the average. Now notice all I typed was AV, and it said, ooh, I have some formulas that start with AV. Do you want to find the average? Why, yes, I want to find the average. And now it's asking me, okay, what do you want to find the average of? Well, I'd like to find the average of all of these values here. Everything in the range from C3, that's the top of this stack, down to C10. And notice now in my formula, I'm finding the average from C3 to C10. And I'll enter that. It looks like on average I use 28 kilowatt hours per day. Another thing I might want to know is what's the maximum number of kilowatt hours per day? What was the greatest number of kilowatt hours that I had in any one day during this? And again, there's a formula for that as well. I type the equal sign to initiate a formula, and then I type max or maximum. I think this one we're just going to go with max. And then we'll select all of these. And looks like the greatest number in my list, the highest day I had, was 50. That's this one here. I might also want to know the minimum number of kilowatt hours that were used in a day. And I might want that to show up in this cell. So I'll type equals min, and I want this whole range here. All right, looks like the lowest day that I had was 14. So you can see when you enter your data that there's some useful information here. Now what I'll tell you is I've already created a data table for you. This looks like a data table, and you can download this from Moodle. And what I've done is that I have already put those formulas in for you. And so all you need to do is enter in the dates that you took your meter readings and the numbers that you read on your meter. and the rest of this is going to automatically calculate for you. Down at the bottom, you'll see that there are two tabs. One of them is called Control Data. That's the data that you took when you were reading your meter before we started this experiment. Then you'll see one that says Experimental Data. This is where you're going to enter the data where you took your metering readings, where you were actually changing a behavior. So what you want to do next is to go into Moodle and download a copy of the sheet that says Data Table in Excel, and then start entering your data. Once you've entered your data, you'll want to save it to your server space so that you can access it later.